Awesome.
All right. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us at the 9th Annual Startup Boston Week. So, as many of you know, our mission with this conference is pretty simple. We aim to bring together the entire startup community across industries, departments, and funding stages. We exist to connect, educate, and celebrate this ecosystem while serving as a trusted and unbiased guide to the best resources that can help you start or scale your startup and team. My name is Grace. I'm going to be your host today. But before we kick things off, I did want to say a huge thank you to Suffolk University Sawyer Business School for hosting this conference. And if you're interested in exploring entrepreneurship, they have a variety of programs and opportunities. Be sure to check out their table in the vendor hall on the 5th floor to learn more. Thank you so much again for attending Startup Boston Week. I'm going to hand you guys over to Jonathan and Jim.
Hey everyone, great to be here with you. I'm Jonathan Corbin. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a company called Maven AGI. We're building AI agents for customer experience. Started in the middle of 2023, raised 3 rounds of funding, $78 million to date. We've been hiring a lot in the Boston area. I think we have over 70 people here in the Boston area. So that's a little bit about where I'm coming from. Before that, I spent 4 years at HubSpot leading the global CS team. I started in 2019, and we were, of course, one of the 5 fastest growing B2B SaaS companies ever after $1 billion in revenue. While I was there, my team went from 238 people to 1,000 people. Some of the challenges as we continue to grow our customer base from 70,000 to 220,000 is that we had to have people talking to every single customer. And so as we continued to grow, as we continued to evolve, the CFO came to me and said, "Hey, Jonathan, love what you're doing. Love the results. You got to figure out how to scale down on your passion." And that was part of the reason why I started Maven. So a little bit of background on me, where I've been.
Yeah, nice to meet you all. I'm Judah Phillips. I'm also an entrepreneur. I've been doing software since I was a boy. It's been a long career, so I'm just going to spare you the details. Look it up on LinkedIn. But last year, I was fortunate enough to sell my software company that I started with my partner in 2019, and it was an AI company. We started doing that when no one would talk to us about AI. And now I work as the Chief AI and Product Officer at a holding company called Market Holdings that's been around for 9 years and is privately owned and raises money for nonprofits. So the AI that I created, well, it does embed transformers. It predates GANs, Stable Diffusion, and Chat GPT. So it is used to score lists and predict behaviors and outcomes. And I did sell some software to HubSpot at one point during the growth periods to help them bring to life customer service and success. And I'd like to think maybe a little bit of that influenced Jonathan. But he has done some amazing stuff. I ended up bootstrapping Spark and raising a very small amount of angel money. And I remember speaking to entrepreneurs during that time, and they said, you really just shoot that big or go home. So I realized there's a go-to-market that says bootstrap it, customer fund it, right? Don't take money from VCs or angels or anybody. You know, if you have a good business, people should buy it, right? You don't need anybody's help. There's also a great case next to me. We're having sufficient capital to scale and go to market into a competitive industry where capital is a moat. It's super important. So I think if I ever had to do it again, and who knows what the future holds, I would take the path of Jonathan. That being said, I was able to have a great and successful exit and love the company and people on the team I work for now.
So right or wrong way to go. It's really going out, creating products that people are willing to pay for, right? And so the progression typically happens is you start off, you have an idea of how you can change the world. For me, it was changing the world of customer experience. For you, it was changing the world of
analytics. Yeah, so I used to do, when no one did it, like data and analytics. People would build reports and charts and graphs. This is like pre-Tableau, pre sort of Microsoft BI. And I I just sort of fell into it. I was analytically driven and sort of quantitatively minded and sort of like to focus on the business and had at that time okay tech skills. So it seemed like I had mathematical skills, so I thought it would be a good thing to go into. And I hired a guy one day out of the Ivory Coast who had been selected to go to a school in Paris. And then he ended up in Rhode Island. He ended up sitting in front of me at this company's large company that had the third largest net network at the time. And I hired him. He started building these little predictors. And it was really helpful when I had these executives asking me what was going to happen on this large internet site in the future. So that gave rise, eventually, when I had the intestinal fortitude and courage to like go and say, hey, the idea of like automating data science is important, and you should just be able to upload your data and get answers that are quantitatively and mathematically accurate. So that's what we ended up doing, and you ever heard of a morphogenic theory? Everybody has the same idea at the same time. Thomas Edison, right? Was there someone else who maybe invented the light bulb too? Similarly, there's some competition in EGI and CS, and there was competition for that idea too. Not in the least form of a large Boston company ended up raising 1,000 times more money than us, that we would run head to head and occasionally win and occasionally lose. They were worldwide data science. So capital is important. There's no right way to do it, but you have to find that pain if you want to lead into the software.
Talk a little bit about the stages that you go through from an entrepreneurial journey. Right, you start off and you have this idea, great. I want to transform the way that people are, going out and they're analyzing the data to derive up performance. And so, for most investors, you're looking for a product market fit, right? You have an idea, great. I want to prove that it works. I want to prove that I'm actually solving a problem. And that's usually like your seed round that people are making investments in. And so it's what are the proof points that folks are looking for when you went out and start looking for?
It's a different market, and so I'm not sure like my experience completely applies to today. Especially in
the range of business.
Yeah, totally. But so I will say, so I'm sure I get the caveat in for, right? So without a doubt, traction was the phrase in 2020, 2019, right around the pandemic when that hit. Business softened and we determined what we should self-funded and customer funded. So traction, and at that point we had $72,000 in ARR, and that seemed to be enough. Interestingly, like I like to say, we made every single mistake we could possibly make, and I'm proud of that because like by making mistakes, failure is the mother of success. So our first customer was DHL. They're still a customer, like DHL, right? We came number 2 in their global RFP. How am I going to support with like a small product team of 450,000 person company? But we lost another Boston based company that raised 1,000 times more. So DHL, then the second company bought us because they were a customer for so long. We really proved it out. We buy your customers. Our third customer is IBM. It took 7 months to close. They don't buy software. They do software handling institute. They buy it at third party firms. Same thing with marketing. Right?
So was it in terms of establishing product market fit? Was it a number of customers? Was there a amount of ARR?
So as enterprise, it was totally different. I can't say like what a VC wants. I know what I would do. Like we should have went out and raised a ton of money because our fourth customer was Nielsen and our fifth customer was University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. So we kept selling enterprises in AI and machine learning technology when most CMOs and most people wouldn't talk to us about it. But the cutting edge people like Kevin at Nielsen who ran all data science thought it was really cool. So we thought enterprise clients and like a small amount of revenue would get us there. And it didn't really work for the VCs in Boston, right? Maybe it was the team. I think part of it was we didn't know how to raise, wasn't going to say anything. And then the other thing was ultimately we didn't have a tight enough story. Like I literally had a calculator, like a TI-84, all right? You know what that is, the 89, like a graphing calculator. What are you going to do with it? Like type into it, like a 13-year-old will do and show like, hey, Dad, look, I type like it's fun. If they say, hey, graph a function, now all of a sudden the TI has something. So we had this like automated machine learning technology that could predict medical services conversion. It could predict churn and upsell at HubSpot. It could predict package supply chain deviation in temperature and cold chain before COVID for DHL. And like none of that story was successful because we probably didn't tell it well enough to raise a sufficient amount of capital. And then when I saw these guys come out, I said,
Because I think the thing is like for you, you're focused on creating, like you're using machine learning models in order to be able to create something predicting.
that's correct.
And so you were able to go out, you were able to say, hey, great, we can establish a product market fit through the customers who come on board. And I think, for us, it was a very similar case where, we started off with a seed round. And then, we went out and we bought a bunch of customers. So we bought on, folks like TripAdvisor, Pro, but it came out of stealth in the middle of last year and said, hey, we're here, we're working with a bunch of customers. We've created these AI agents that are capable of solving over 93% of customers' inquiries within a home. And so we came out with an OpenAI case study and some of the work we were doing with them. And so for us, that was great. It was an ability for us to go out, be able to create a product, and be able to nurture it, to learn from the customers we were working with, and continue to evolve it. Allowed us to be able to establish a product market fit very similar to what you did, right? Where you brought on these other customers. And you were able to go out there, and I think after that, it was going to right?
It was, yeah, but it was never really a goal to raise money. That's the thing. It was always a goal to have like a successful business that would create value for customers and hopefully like we could pay ourselves, and, pay our employees, and create something of worth that maybe at one point would be an exit. So like financing it didn't like set out to raise money from VCs. As a matter of fact, like we rejected taking money from VCs when we took like $1 million from all we did. So I don't know if I would do that again. I'd probably take it as much and I'd spend it as quickly as possible.
I think it's an important color, right? There's different types of businesses. There's some businesses where like, hey, great, for what all costs. And of course, we've seen multiple times where that goes wrong. There's other types of businesses that focus on building a great business. Focus on creating happy customers, focus on making sure that you're building something that's sustainable. There's no right or wrong way to do it. It's just, that's how you go about building a business, and everyone has a place of doing that.
So let me give you an example. So we always were profitable. It doesn't mean that I always paid myself. I think I paid myself $0 many years, and I think I also paid myself $30,000 at the most in a year I ever had. Usually it was around $11,000 a year. So save your money, right? But it was a profitable business, and we certainly paid our employees like market rates for startups and awesome. And how did we end up like developing a competing technology that we go against somebody that raises 1,000 times more? Because with the money we had, we funded university professors, and to this day continue to grant money to universities in Boston. And we were at the time, we don't do this anymore. We were able to negotiate IP licensing agreements with Genome Code, and if we gave implicit permission if they wanted to publish code that publish in academic journals, we would like approve that. So that was a great way to bring in a lot of engineering talent that was learning and coding research papers in our interest area before they ever got into the corporate world and worked for our competitors. So the challenge with that is you don't have a lot of team. So if you look at the 57 different engineers that have worked at Spark, many of them have gone on to some story companies, right? But they learned how to build software with us. So when you do it with no money, you have to make sacrifices personally, professionally, right? On how you kind of go to market. I would do that. I would do totally different than today. So to Jonathan's point, the idea is, do you know Unusual Ventures? I would encourage you all, if you know what Unusual Ventures is, to like read about their customer discovery process, where they talk about going out and finding customers or people who like use your stuff and learning from them. And hoping that if you develop something without a concentration risk on those couple customers, you can develop something that other people want. And the idea being that you discover, you will buy it or you let them go. And through that process of validation and proof point, and a framework from VC, you can amplify your PMF or kind of see where it is, CP, right? You go to market together and you can start that cadence up. We didn't do any of that. So there's a lot of ways to skin the cat. I would recommend that approach if I had to do it again. And I think I saw you do that or talk to me.
I think the interesting thing is that you see the kind of the different inflection points that you go through as a startup. And you start off, great, I have an idea. Then you move to a product market fit. Great, the people that are willing to pay me for my idea. There's enough people in this industry that are willing to give me money that I think that I actually have something that's working. And then after you establish that product market fit, your job as a founder is to scale it as fast as possible. And how you go about doing that is through distribution. And so you go out, and for most people, they go out and create, I'm going to create this massive, well, depending on your funding rounds, the sales team is going to go out there and tell everyone about my product. And they're going to go knock on every door, tell everyone that they think might be a prospect, hey, here's our product, here's how you can use it. In your case, like Spark, it sounds like you were doing something similar with large enterprises. And then, as you continue to grow, you scale the organization. And I think that's where it becomes important, is the different functions that you're adding in. Those are the places you start adding in your marketing and your SDRs and the other aspects that you need in order to be able to continue to evolve in that stage.
Yeah.
How did you go from individual founder, you're out there, you're selling deals at IBM and these other places, to building a team and moving into that product market fit and beyond that?
This is a good question. I mean, you guys are all entrepreneurs, right? How many entrepreneurs in the room? So I always think you have to speak honestly 100% of the time, and especially maybe brashly with entrepreneurs. So like, my offensive will say this, I'm never thinking like, we had PMF, but I don't think we ever recognized it. So like, our second customer is the one that bought us. They were our customer for 5 years. Like they made, and if I knew the economics that they were earning the software, it would charge them a lot more, right? So, the PMF was right in front of us. And I remember at one point asking one of our investors, like, should we concentrate on this? And he was like, let's take it. And like, for a time, it was like a poison that Spark was broad. And it could predict, if you're going to drink your coffee or your success, or, we did for ResCap management, we predicted, their portfolio company success, which is the largest private equity company in the world. So like all these different use cases, we thought the TIA or 84 was powerful, but to the venture capital community, it wasn't narrow. So, if I just say, hey, better fundraising starts with better predictions, right? AI for anyone. Like that would have been a better message. So even when I talk to Jonathan and, we get to hang out at the industry events, I ask him how he's doing, and I'm like, he's really rocking. He knows how much success. So that idea of PMF is a fit in a problem, right? In a market. It's not for everybody. It's not a cow.
I think that is an important call out, right? It's like, if you're going after a large horizontal space, like for David, for example, we started off building AI agents for customer experience. Now, everyone has customer experience challenge, whether you're a school, whether you're a department store, whether you sell office. And so in a world where everyone has the same challenge, where do you get started? For us, we looked at it and said, what are the potential entry points in order for us to be able to create that product market fit? There were 3 we kind of considered. The first was e-commerce. Everyone here in this room has bought something online. I'm 100% sure of that. And many of us have experienced the challenge of going out and doing that. And they're usually about 3 different challenges that everyone has. The first one is, hey, there's a problem with my transaction didn't go through. The second is, I want to return this, it's not working. And then the other is like, there was an error with shipping and receiving, right? And so we said, hey, everyone has these problems, and that's the problem we should go tackle. You go deeper into it, you understand what are the dynamic, the pricing dynamics of those customers and how to go. What we found out, turns out with low CAC, you're not going to invest a lot of money in making sure you retain those customers. That's not the right entry point in. With such a simplistic use case, is that really an area where you're going to create a moat? Probably not. The second area that we considered was, okay, great, you have these B2C companies that are scaling rapidly, they just need a better chatbot. Again, you go deeper into that economics and you find out, hey, like the CAC is not significant. You're not investing in LTV, so maybe that's not the area. And for us, we actually started at the brand market, very focused on complex use cases where we can create a moat around our business and then work our way down. But I think it's important that you focus all of your resources in one area go deep in that. That allows you to establish product market fit and to ensure that you have the same store. You're solving a real problem for someone. So I like the idea of focus. To your point, maybe it's focusing on PE firms who are trying to understand what their portfolio understand what they do.
We thought about that, we had a couple. But we didn't go in that direction because we stayed broad. So it's a good point. If I were to do it again, I would like the capability that could apply to many industries. The idea was like build the muscle memory in one industry and then muscles and the memory to apply to others. But that's sort of a sword, right? It's really hard to build a start. And what I found doing like 7 go-to-markets is everything 7 times harder, right? Different conversation, different white paper, different landing page. So like it just causes so many problems to believe you're so awesome and you can do anything. So just like realize and be humble that the one thing that somebody's paying you for, whether you like it or not, is probably what your business should be built around. You hope that with each or whatever that you figured out the right thing that you concentrate on. But yeah, I completely agree. So like a factor, we looked at e-commerce. One of the only deals that I ever lost, like it was in DocuSign. I had signed it. It was going to the holding company's VP of digital, was an e-commerce company that's large, owns many different brands that the sun doesn't shine on the self face, I guess, because that must have been the side we were on when they walked away from the deal. And that was e-commerce. So e-commerce has like really thin margins. And everybody knows e-commerce, right? Everyone's an expert. You guys are all experts in e-commerce, You're gonna tell that e-commerce, so that wasn't a good fit. Healthcare, hard to tell PhDs and doctors who run those hospitals that your AI is better than, their PhDs, right? So maybe that's a hard sell. The CFOs, it's maybe a little easier. Tech companies, come on, Squark. Data scientist, I didn't know that myself, we know better. So that was always a tough sell. And so you might imagine I can speak the language pretty well and have a lot of ways to handle objections and technical sales. And we didn't sell to data science teams. Data science teams end up pledging, right? They can just say no. So we sold to the teams that didn't get good service, the teams that didn't get attention, the teams that got service but it was terrible, the teams that wanted to build their own data science but they weren't able to, and other teams that were able to support them. So there are a lot of vectors that you can go into, and we didn't sell on our R squared is better than yours, our mean deviance is better. None of that. We sold on MPV and IRR, and we sold on like business use cases that were tied back to specific value, and those were generally elicited by the business. So, like I get on the phone with somebody today. I used to spend a lot of time on the phone teaching people about this stuff, hoping people would buy, and then like I basically do this, and I encourage you all to be facing sales. Like, what type of stuff? Yeah. So what are you looking at? Where are you at in the process? How do you buy software? How many people buy software in this room? Like have a budget to buy software. You know how to buy, right? If you're going to buy software, there's somebody you got to call. There may be 3 legal agreements, like a 4, people have 3 contracts, vendors you got to evaluate. You know how to do it. So the next thing is like, you got a budget, you sign, and if any of those questions are no in like the first 10 minutes, it's like, well, it's really awesome to talk to you. I'm super excited you asked Spark. Like, who's the buyer? What's your timeline? You get that person on the phone, and it's like, if not, it's a waste of my time. My time is super valuable. And I still go and sell. Like I will still go on calls. And then you also, to Jonathan's point, like you gotta look at like the market. So when like I think doing some investing, when I look at these companies, I think like it's the team at an early stage. And that's one of the things Jonathan did wonderfully. Besides being a very capable executive, he also brought in some really talented people. Sandy Shalabi too. Right? Hard to get. Better CTO in a startup where Eugene Mann ran ML for Shred. So, hyperscalers. So you gotta it's about the team, and there's gonna be a lot of questions on the team. And you never want to do a 50-50 split, guys, right? You always want to have a founder, probably 90-10. And then you want to look at the market. And so nonprofit industry, how big is it? Is it bigger than CRM? Yes, no. How many people bigger than CRM? Yes or no? Nonprofit. Bigger than CRM. All right. It's 5 times bigger than CRM. It's a $585 billion market a year. CRM's 90 billion. So think of like the wealth generated in nonprofit. So lots of money. It's like gambling. Anybody know a company in Boston that does gambling? Those guys have done pretty well, right? See the brand around a lot. We used to work at District Bank. Really nice guys used to come out and hang out at all these shows, but it's harder. So,
What were some of the good moments for you that really changed your trajectory at the start? You guys were around for what, 7 years?
Yeah.
You made the exit all the entrepreneurs in here one day.
It's all, but I don't know any of it anymore. What were like the points? I think you just sort of get sick of being told no at some point. You know, it's like I get it, 350 VC meetings for good companies. Maybe you just don't have a good idea. So like, you know, I think the pivot point was you being told no so many times, and then see the value our customers generate. So that the pivot point was that it was never going to scale as a giant startup in the way a VC would, and so that I was alone with no excuses. That was my pivot point. And then you know what I said? I need to raise more money. I went out and did it. It's a long story, not a great story. Could have done it. And so instead, I did this. I said, I'm a self-trainer. And so I went on and I said I got 3,600 people in corporate development off the lift on student info. I talked to my investors. I came up with a one-pager. I sent 3,600 corporate development people. I got 90 meetings. I had a bunch of them with big companies. I even visited a recent IPO that has a cool speak VC, didn't go through. Talked to my investors. They said, hey, your customers will buy you. I didn't want to live weak. So I went and I talked to all my customers. And I said this. I said, it's great to be an AI company. It's, you know, there's a lot of opportunity, a lot of people kicking the tires, and we're going to make a decision strategically on what to do next with the business. Are you interested in exploring synergies? And that gave rise to the acquisition. So like the pivot point was realizing that a lot of what I was told in the startup lore, in the startup world, didn't apply. The way I would give it to you is like, anybody have any children in here? All right, and a few of you are women, so you've given birth. There's a type of Dr. Bradley, even who Bradley method is unmedicated on natural childbirth. It's like an approach to birth, right? That my wife wanted to use. So I spent 16 weeks becoming a certified Bradley training coach to learn all the stages of labor, to be able to control the labor rooms, to be able to make it on natural childbirth, which we did. And it was a stressful event like a startup, the best startup though. The reason I bring it up is like everything I learned about labor and birthing and the sequence of how it went down was completely different than what occurred in real life. And that's kind of how I built this startup. And so different type of birth, different type of baby. But I would sort of be cautious of who you listen to. I remember I was out in Utah in a garage with a lot of nice cars. And I was talking to a guy and I was going to ask him for some cash. He had plenty of cash. And he's like, you know what? As soon as you ask somebody for cash, you know what they want? And I was like, what? Well, he just played in his music groove, and he said they want to know when they're going to get paid back. And I was like, and so that was always a weight on me when I took any money from anybody. So everybody's path is different. So the pivot points are all different. The pivot point was for me was when I realized I was a little excuses, and there was no way it was going to get out. No way.
I think, you know, I was talking to an investor the other day, and they said, you know, there's a thing about but I want people around me. It sounds like you made that figure on your own, you know, you're going, yes, there are different types of businesses. Some are like, hey, you know, you wanted to get, you know, rocket ship. Others is like, hey, I want to build a great business. I want to create a great product that's going to be put in front of a bunch of people who want to use it. But you know, at the end of the day, like it's the founder. So that's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, there was no timeline that I ever took. Like it didn't matter, you know. I mean, I paid myself nothing, right? I paid everybody else, it all works out in the end. I mean, my friend, Dr. Harpreet Singh, was start ExpertFi. Anybody know ExpertFi? They're like a Harvard, lab startup. Sort of, we've done that. Over the years, he was like, one of my sort of lean period, I was pretty stressed out, like, it sucks. I talked to him and he's like, you have to persist. Like, because you just have to be there. Like, if you're not there at the end, like, why are you there at all? So, like, I sort of internalized that. And it's just like, I know it's sort of cliche, kind of cheesy to say, but it's kind of like the whole, chewing on, like, staring at the abyss, chewing on glass. The whole, you guys know that whole quote? Anybody know the whole quote? Because you only get a piece of it from Wall Street, right? In the startup, piece. The other piece, if I don't recall exactly, it's like, you look into the abyss, you see nothing staring back, and that's when a person goes, it's masculine, as a person finds themselves, right? And so I think like that is actually a pretty good, albeit pop culture metaphor for a startup, right? It's not, Jonathan has had amazing success at it. Like I remember finding out, and I said, oh, that was a really quick raise. We raised like $3 million in like 2 weeks for one product.
It was 3 days.
3 days, exactly. That's kind of unheard of in Boston. I'm like, you raise for people in Boston? He's like, no. I was like, okay, New York City, yeah. And then I said, how? And can you send me the deck? And he's like, you're investing in this. No, but he sent me the deck and he showed me. And I hadn't had an exit. It was I opened the page. I opened the first page, and it was like Jonathan Sam Eugene, like the credentials. And then I just had seen so many decks and tried to like put together my own deck and show decks, buy services to prepare pitch decks and stuff. That I realized like how important it's the team. So I was talking to the team, and it's the product, and then there's the market. Well, I talked to the team market, then there's the product. We had a product, right? Our product was always kick ass. And go ahead, love. And then the final thing was alignment. And this is like a thing that like I would really look for. I never fund anybody did a 50-50 partnership, and I'd be like, no co-CEOs. That's just founder conflict hidden by titles. Every single 100% time. That's my belief. All right, ready? Is that you need aligned founders. Like there's a great story that the DraftKings guy wrote about, and it's on LinkedIn. I think he's talking about one of the VCs down Chinatown. Like all three of them were all stressed out, and I guess they were like, "You guys all will be together in the future," and they were wrong, right? Those guys are the best of the DraftKings. So you chose well. Everybody needs to choose well.
I think the other
And that's the alignment you need.
The other thing that from the dialogue here is that you went into an area that you really didn't qualify for. Right? Like your history was there and you had maybe you could say an unfair advantage because you've been doing that in corporate setting for a long time.
That's how I got the meetings.
Right. And I think it's like, going into places where you do have a unique advantage is something that of course investors look for and it's advantageous for you. So, for many people, they've spent a certain amount of time understanding whether it's studying or working in the industry and using that to your advantage is something that investors look for as well. Why would I invest in you versus somebody else?
Yeah, and there's a bunch of like good startups out there too. Like, and it's like operators. Like, this is my thing. If I ever do it again, I will only listen to operators. That for right or wrong. A great operator, legendary Steve Jobs, right? He has, all these little things that have been captured, like in scrambled little early internet videos. And he talks about asking people for help. No one ever says no. Like, I was like, okay, I'll ask people for help. And so that was helpful to ask people. I'll give you an example of that. So, I'll give you an example now. So, like, he had $42,000 in ARR, and we didn't know how to raise it. And I thought to myself, like, I am going to get the money from Amazon. Just delusional entrepreneur. On a Sunday morning, I wrote, this story, I wrote Jeff Bezos an email. because during grad school, I helped to, I did a turnaround management course with a guy named Harlan, created the Turnaround Management Association. And we turned around the first Bounty Quest, which was funded by Jeff Bezos. So it was a lawyer in Boston, and my friend was an IT guy, so I needed this class to get like a case study to do a turnaround management, a book called The Phoenix. So I did this, and we turned around this Bezos startup, and I got an A. And I wanted, and so like I did this, and I never sent it to him. I went and I did my interviews. And so now that the startup is done really well, maybe it's a venture capital from Amazon, because I knew about corporate venture capital. So I write them, I say, hey, I did this thing, now I'm the CEO of this startup. I want to talk to Amazon, corporate development. I didn't, really ask for. So I was using FeedBurner at the time. I was like FeedBurner, that's old RSS, FeedBurner. And FeedBurner would use reverse IP to look up companies on our old, very text-heavy website. If anyone's about Amazon, they write papers. So text-heavy is good. So I start noticing Amazon crawling. I didn't even do it together. And then I got an email from corporate development like a week later. And I had a conversation with Amazon at the time. This was in PCR, but they invited us into their AWS program. It was a cheap year. And I always thought to myself, I don't want to prove it. All right. Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos answered my email. But it wasn't, and then I sent a thank you. And he got, and then he right back to me. A person named Alice Powers, his secretary. And she said, she said, thank you. Reads all his emails 2 years. And so then she responded back to me. I asked him to go to my board. Right? You gotta have, we're so crazy. So I'm like, I understand, he'd like to join the board. She got back and said, such a generous offer, I was honored by the opportunity. It was really polite. But one of the things about Mr. Bezos doesn't have all the time to be amazing things. Thank you. So like entrepreneurs help other entrepreneurs. So I like to listen to operators. They've always told me
Good advice. I think we have, about 10 minutes left?
20-ish, roughly.
Okay. So we can sit here and talk all day. I know there's a lot of people in the room, if you're entrepreneurs, maybe there's some questions that you have, so take some questions now.
Yeah. When I do my events in Boston, because of my ability or desire to obviously talk, I turn it over to the audience to ask questions. So let's take some questions. If we don't get questions, we're going to do a Randy Moss. You guys know Randy Moss?
We got some up here.
My question is, how do you decide how to choose a co-founder?
Well, to be honest with you, if I'm doing it, I'll never have a co-founder. I like my co-founders, good guys, but it was just I'm careful not to give any money because I don't have a co-founder. I'll give you
I have a different perspective. I think, look, startups are challenging, right? And they're risky. And so when you look at it, like seed round investors, they expect that 90% of their investors are not going to pay off. You as an entrepreneur, you have a limited amount of time. That's what you're investing in. How do you make the most of that? You want to decrease the exposure that you have, increase your opportunities to be able to be successful. And so if you're building a software company like me, great. I know this space. I haven't built software in 20 years. So I want engineers. I want someone who knows how to build an amazing product at scale. And so I look for complementary skills that are going to allow me to be able to move fast, to decrease the risk of not being able to build the right product, not being able to hire the right engineers, not being able to go up and solve problems. So for me, that's what I was looking to do when I brought on the numbers.
I agree. I think it's what equity you give them and what title you retain starting the company. So I'm not saying you're not a co-founder. I'm just saying you're a founder. And I'm just saying the split is 90. And we can negotiate that, right? But that's the way it is. If I'm going to kick in and do it again, because it's a real slog, it's real hard. It's not a lot of fun. It has great highs, it's really low lows. And if I'm going to put myself out there with especially someone else's money, it's going to be I'm not going to do it. I don't need to. when I go out there and do it again, I'm not saying I don't have a co-founder. I'm saying that the throat to choke is mine only. And here's my throat to choke. So that's what.
It might be your thought about too, like what you're trying to do, right? For some people, it's,
Yeah,
okay, I want to go out there and I want to build an amazing business. I care less about everyone doing things my way. I want to build a great business, and how do I go about doing that? Well, I need to bring great people on board who are knowledgeable, we're capable, we're going from the same level of effort that I am.
I have a question about growth engineering at Native. So in my research, and tell me if this is incorrect, but I learned that in the past year or so, maybe went from 0 to 40, around 40 enterprise customers. So what growth metrics and engineering experience were most effective in driving this acquisition growth? And how did you prioritize which growth initiatives to focus on first?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think when you start with like what are the baseline requirements you have to have in order for you to be able to do things like on experiments. So you have to start by putting the right systems in place. Of course, I've been using people at HubSpot, so we started with the CRM. And then we said, okay, great, how do we evolve? There's a bunch of companies that are out there talking about their AI agents and their capabilities. They have a lot more money than we do. So how do we be very strategic where we're placing our bets and the allocation money? And so we went out there and we said, what are the workflows we want to design? Well, one of the great ways for us to be able to engage with prospects, customers, people who are coming to our website, is for us to go out there and engage them on email. And then we started bringing in, companies like Clay and Apollo who are data sources. Started pulling those together, pulling information from about 100 different signals that we use across each of the prospects that we're looking at, using those along with those just like a Mallard for our SDRs, and a couple of other tools that we've created in-house. And so we pulled all of those together and implemented those into a workflow for prospects, for customers, for each of the people we think might be potential for them to either acquire or to buy more of it. And so we brought on a couple of go-to-market engineers. We brought on some really good technical ops folks who can do some parts of that as well. So we started investing in that go-to-market engineering function probably about a year in. And then before that, we actually had some agencies that we were working with at that. We're doing some of the go-to-market engineering functions.
I mean, I would add to that, the nature of generating business has changed. Like when we were doing it 5 years ago, you could like do crazy things. You get some response. That was a little raw. It really depends on who you're selling to. Your ICPs, what your like ACPs are. Like do I really expect somebody to buy a $500,000 software? It's not cool. Or like a LinkedIn message. The more effective channels for us have been like in person and some trade shows.
It depends on the stage for sure. I mean, like in early days, people were talking, investors were talking about us. We were on a bunch of lists of big companies in the space, but most people didn't, right?
Yeah,
especially big companies that we're selling to. So there's a variety of different things that work well.
Yeah, like my belief was so Bain. So I wanted to talk to somebody with Bain, and so I got into Forrester. Like Forrester, the analyst, even though Forrester is IDC. Sure. So not the easiest thing to get into, but I managed to get us in, and that opened up this perception that we had credibility. So having like an artifact or asset or external credibility was really important. I think that, having case studies where you have performance that's proven and referenceable is really important for a startup. You can make up a lot of things. A lot of startups make up a lot of things. A lot of my competitors make up a lot of things. But it's okay. Because ultimately, the proof is putting this on us, right? And it all comes out in the wash. So you have to have case studies. So I have like some pretty, everything I say on the Spark website is like, I can give you a customer, and I can give you a buyer to reference. So case studies, artifacts that provide credibility to analysts, that's a heavier lift now. Because even though you've been accepted and told, we're the ones that were in the reports we've been pulled from last minute recently. X amount. So those are harder bars to get into, despite giving you so those are really helpful. We had like phone burner, which I think must be like phone burner is you got to take a class in order to get authorized to use it. You can really do some phone malicious activities. If you want to call 10,000 people at once, you can ask phone burner to do it. So you can use phone burner. Who knows what DMARC, SPF, and DCAM are? Hands, SPF. How many people send emails from their business? How many people know what SPF is? See, this is the challenge. Why don't get in? So there's something called Center Protection Framework. You need that like entries. Not hard, they're like DNS entries to make sure you got any more or you don't get in. So I can't tell you how many times I look at my junk folder and I'm getting like invest in my company, buy my software, and they just can't get in. So it's like, I'm gonna get you leads for your business. You're in my junk. So like you need to have, you say Center Framework set up. And then like you have to, people don't buy software, right? So you have to like, I once heard Kurt Vonnegut, this is in the 90s, and he said, public speech, like nobody remembers what she said. They just want to remember that they just know, they just conclude if you're on it. And that's what they're going to do. So like that's always been my approach to like speaking, my approach to like sales is not to like sell anybody anything, but to like enable them to buy. My stuff is cool.
That's a good way to throw, like we're going after enterprises. And so you're using new mediums to communicate with your audience, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, why do you stand up? Well, great, we're using videos, we're sending them to customers. And so, hey, I'm a real person, I'm not AI.
And then you have to have like a funnel. Like if you go to the Spark website now, which is much better than it was a while ago because they just did it with an agency in London, try to get like a lot of detail and you'll just hit forms. You'll just hit forms. You know what I mean? This isn't free education, this isn't kinds. It's business.
There's a few more questions out there.
Yeah, a few more questions.
Talk about growth for a long time.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for engaging us in such an amazing conversation. My name is Smita. I have a startup focused on supporting women during postpartum. It's been 2 years since I've paid myself, so my question was specific to you, Jude. How do you cope with some of those lows that come with the decision, and any advice for entrepreneurs that are missing?
Yeah, so like prior to starting the software company, I ran a boutique analytics consultancy called Smart Mind. This little exciting stuff. And I sold like group consulting services post my big tech career to like large companies. And like I charged them, right? Because it was worth it and they would pay. And I was saved a lot of money. And then I invested my money. And I always like, ever since I found my first job in software when I was 20 years old. Yeah, I was 20. Sovereign Hill Software. I always like funded my work. And then I have a master's of science in finance. So like, and my dad gave me Rich Dad Poor Dad one time. Have you guys ever read Rich Dad Poor Dad? And whether you like the guy or not, you think his lifestyle choices are okay. Like one thing stuck to me is he was like, Poor Dad has one revenue stream, Rich Dad has multiple revenue streams. So like, I've always had multiple revenue streams.
You still covered calls on Fastly during COVID.
No, we were at NVIDIA Inception startup in 2019, which was $50. But
how did you get into technology with the highs, lows, ups and downs?
like going back to like my initial statement that I knew I was never going to fail and there was no timeline that I would exist on where I was going to fail, I just felt like it was just an investment in the future. It sucked. Like there's some things I like. When you don't have enough money to buy things, that's going to suck. But other than that, it's okay. You know what I mean? So yeah, you just make the sacrifices,
I think the other
and it just overlooks. I mean, it could have been a big disaster.
thing is being around other people who are experiencing, similar journeys. So, the community of entrepreneurship in Boston area is great. You can see from this room here. And so being around other people who are going through that same journey together with you, I think everyone experiences those, regardless of the stage that you're at. And, even public CEOs go through that same challenge. And, we're a couple of deals away from getting our quarter, and we have to talk to the analysts about that. So everyone goes through that. I think just being around other people who are honest with you about the journey that they're going through is really helpful.
For sure.
Hi, my name is Seth Fox. I've spent about nearly 20 years in technology sales on the enterprise side. And I know that as founders, CEOs, and folks are stretched very thin. And very early on in your process, you're doing the majority of this out. As you've alluded to the fact that you still do some of this out. I'm curious to know, like, at what point you can walk me through your process for when you decide to bring your first salesperson on board and kind of what your process is for doing.
You should go first. No, I'll give you the.
So we were talking a little bit earlier about the different stages of a startup. You start off and you have an idea, and then you move into your great, I want to establish a product market fit. And when you reach the point where you say, hey, I've established a product market fit, and my job now is to get the distribution as fast as possible, is when you start bringing on salespeople for me. There's other people who, hey, great, I'm an engineer, I have a company, I don't want to sell, I don't know how to sell, I'm not going to do it. There's other people who feel very comfortable in front of customers and being able to pitch them and close down. And so, for us, that's kind of the stages that we've been through. And then we reach the stage, right? We have people, who are paying us hundreds of thousands of dollars in order to use our technology. Multiple companies doing that. Now, how do we scale this as fast as possible? We're ready to bring in sales folks. We're ready to bring on the leaders who might help us build those out. And of course, we deliver running functions and modifications to those. So that's how we thought about it in terms of like what were the characteristics we were looking for people we were bringing in. I think in a startup, especially when it's moving at rocket speed, you move incredibly fast. The structure that you're looking for, experience in other companies that are more established, great. You start, you have onboarding days, you have training classes you go through. Here's the documentation. Spend 6 weeks reading those. None of that exists. You start, first day, here's a lead, good luck. And so I think, a little bit is that you need intellectual curiosity, especially in the field that we're in, where you have large language models that are evolving by week. And that changes the way that you do everything. And so, we were looking for intellectual curiosity, people who are mentally agile, and people who know how to solve problems. And so if I were to characterize, what are the 3 things that we're looking for, those would be the top 3.
Yeah, those are all good. I think one of the things that you benefited from is having capital, right? Because you could apply that for your company and companies you paid to hire them, which isn't always like
Having money is good.
It's a wonderful thing, but I didn't have that. So like the question is when do you bring in salespeople? So I think we brought in marketing and sales too early. We brought in marketing before we really had a 1.0. I thought like a marketer would be able to like articulate the founder vision. Not bad, but like it was too early. And then early 0 to 1, 1 to 2 sales is often founder led. And even if you bring in somebody, like the founder needs to be on the call because there's some technical sales, or you get the data scientist on, or sort of anyone with data science is like close to deals, so I'm sure it doesn't equal the docu side. And so you got to get on it. So we're hiring sales right now, and just brought in folks. And what I look for, even at this stage, which is in a 4,000 person company, separate business unit, is assuming he takes the job as the guy who grew this from 0 to 50 million. So I wanted someone who knew like how to work with less than you would get at like Oracle or Cisco or something like that. We did hire I thought maybe like, oh, we'll hire these shark skin suit, leather briefcase carrying shiny shoes, sales guys from big tech. And like, they're all very capable, awesome individuals. But like, they're just at this point. It's like Oracle or any big company, you have like a deck, you have a marketing team, you have, value propositions, and there's a sales process, and there's a CRM tool, there's a website. Like, you may have none of that. And so like, how do you generate sales if you don't have any? You need to have those three things you said, and the ability to get stuff done. And that's kind of why startups are so hard, because it takes a long time. It's not an 8-9-to-5 job. And you gotta find the people who do it. And like, I hear like, startup, and it's like, well, it did, but like, it was Series B or Series C, right? Like a 0 to 1 startup, or pre-funding, like very like funded series something, is just a really different animal. Even like, I'm not kidding you, last night I went on this year, and so maybe they're listening, discount.
Yeah, now.
And we have in the holding company some top 50 clients, and they work in, when I want to sell into like the most senior person possible, the CEO like Jonathan, he would get to talk to this person. So CEO's generally like pushing down to like, and that's maybe a good or bad thing. But I try to go as high as I go. So for like our ICP nowadays, it's like a chief development officer at a very large nonprofits that you all heard of. And so I had 50 of those that are customers. And so I went on LinkedIn and I like literally connected, and I rarely ever invite my clients to connect. And I literally like went in and I wrote personalized emails based on what I knew about their business, what I knew about Spark, and I could help, conservation, rights and advocacy, or climate. And I sent them emails. And I have now 3 meetings with like chief development officers of some of the top 50 charities in the world, actually. And I was just sending LinkedIn emails. One, I think, is a sales guy who went to another company, so I don't know if he's the chief development officer, it's a little bit of on LinkedIn. But like, that's what you do. And like, what I will do is I will then bring in these new salespeople and like teach them the process. And the process has 4 objectives. The first is what's Spark. That was very hard when it's the calculator, because it does anything you want it to. It's very easy when I say, well, yeah, nonprofit funding. The next thing was like, what's the use case? AI is sold on use cases. It's not sold on technology. No one cares. We might. Say anything. It's cool. Like I say, if no one's buying it, it's a hobby. So, the second thing was like, what's the use case? And that's where you tie the value props, right? That's where you build the business. That's like what people stand on. That's what the discovery numbers. That's what the NPV models are. That's like, all of it is about the use case. The next thing was like, what data do we use? That was a big thing, and we've always been data agnostic, but we have connectors, we don't want to impose some model on people that can map their data to. So there can sometimes be a little work, but in the nonprofit world, their donor files are pretty standardized. So the data work becomes somewhat, less challenging. The third one was like, who's going to do it? So like, and so one of the things I learned, I'll tell you, software advice, told Jonathan this, like, I do not do free shit. No. Just not going to do it. So there's no free POCs. If you want to like test it out, because you don't believe all of our information that we've proven, and you're a real buyer and you don't believe it, then you can do a 3-month trial and a 45-day opt-out cost. So like, we're out of time.
Yeah.
And then the final thing, so I would never do that because it puts too much pressure on, like, it puts too much power in the customer's hands to say, no, the POC didn't work out, you need to meet these metrics. It's like, buy my software, or don't buy my software. So that was a real big thing to me, and I would hit those 4 things. And that's how I know if they were qualified in those questions. And then there's a lot more to it, but you have to teach the people that. And once they can learn that, then I would put my hands off. And I never got to that point yet. I also like to sell, so part of like, I would never found a funder who can't sell deals. That's my opinion. Again, you feel opinion. Founders sell deals. Can't sell deals, won't be a founder. Sure.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you so much to our speakers. You guys were incredible. The next session in this room is going to be Building the Future, How Robotics and Automation Are Changing Everything. That's going to be at 1 p.m. We have a brief break here until 1 p.m. for lunch for everyone. If you're joining us virtually, you don't need to go anywhere. Just choose the next session on the schedule. And then lastly, for any early stage founders in the room, this Friday at the closing party, you have a chance to share your venture at the Startup Showcase open mic. So stop by the welcome desk in the first floor lobby. They're going to have some details about how you could potentially get a table for your startup. And we'll see you at the next session, hopefully. Thank you so much again, everyone.